Okay, so you guys have really outdone yourselves this time. I mean, seriously, the stuff you sent over is amazing. All about, like, getting things done, being more effective, productivity, all that jazz.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Totally. But a good one, right? I'm actually kind of pumped to dive into this, and we're going to be looking at specifically excerpts from Eat That Frog. I mean, everyone's heard of that,
Yeah,
right?
classic.
For good reason, I think.
Yeah.
And what we really want to do as we go through this stuff is find those nuggets, like what are the real game changers here? The strategies that can actually help you not just do more, but like do it better with less stress, ideally. And maybe, just maybe, finally kick procrastination's butt.
That's the dream.
Right. And the thing that really struck me right off the bat with Eat That Frog is that, like, deceptively simple idea, you know? Tackle the worst thing first, your biggest, ugliest frog. Just get it out of the way.
Such a strong image, isn't it?
It is. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like, if you get that huge, daunting thing off your plate first, everything else feels a little easier, right?
Totally. It's like a mental hurdle you climb.
Exactly. And let's be honest, we all have those monster to-do lists these days, right?
Yeah.
Things that just seem to multiply overnight. So, yeah, anything that promises a little bit of control in that chaos is definitely worth exploring.
Absolutely.
So let's jump in, shall we? Chapter 1 of Eat That Frog is all about setting the stage for success. And the big theme there is, you guessed it, clarity.
Makes sense.
And they hit you with the stat right away that is just like, whoa, only 3% of adults have clear written goals. 3%.
That's tiny.
I know. But here's the kicker. That tiny little group achieves significantly more than everyone else.
Okay, that's pretty compelling.
Yeah.
I mean, it really makes you think about the power of just like deciding what you want and actually writing it down.
Right. It's not just wishing and hoping, it's being intentional. So the book lays out this 7-step formula for getting that clarity. First, you got to figure out what you want. Sounds obvious, but there's this quote in there from Stephen Covey that's like a total mic drop moment. He says, before you begin scrambling up the ladder of success, make sure that it is leaning against the right building.
Ooh, that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, are you even climbing towards what you actually want? It's a good gut check.
Absolutely. Making sure your energy is aligned with your goals.
Totally. Then, step 2, you write it down, which, I mean, we just talked about how powerful that can be. But it's that thing, taking it from a fleeting thought to something tangible.
Putting it out into the universe.
Literally. Okay, step 3 is setting a deadline, which, again, seems kind of basic, but deadlines create that sense of urgency, right? Without them, things can just linger forever. Step 4 is where you make your list, like everything you need to do to reach that goal.
Rain dump time.
Yeah, exactly. Get it all out of your head onto paper.
So you can actually start to make a plan.
Which is step 5. Organizing that list by priority and sequence. Figuring out what needs to happen first, what depends on what, that kind of thing. The book even suggests visualizing it, like literally making a flow chart or something.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, kind of like that. Okay, step 6 is all about action. And not just action, but immediate action. They say, an average plan vigorously executed is far better than a brilliant plan on which nothing is done.
I've definitely been guilty of the brilliant plan, no action thing.
Haven't we all? It's easy to get caught up in the planning phase and never actually do the thing. So yeah, taking that first step is key. And then step 7, the final one, is to do something, anything, every single day that moves you towards that big goal. It's about building consistency,
Momentum.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. Just keep moving forward.
Little by little.
Exactly. Now, on top of those 7 steps, the book also has this exercise where you list 10 goals you want to achieve in the next year. But here's the thing. You have to phrase them in the present tense, positively and personally.
So like, I am running a marathon instead of I want to run a marathon.
Exactly. It's about shifting your mindset, seeing those goals as already in motion. And then from those 10, you pick the one that would have the absolute biggest positive impact on your life. That becomes your prime frog.
Your main focus.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to chapter 2, the power of planning. This chapter really digs into why planning is so important. And it's not just about being organized, it's about actually freeing up your mind and reducing procrastination.
Interesting.
There's this great quote in there from Alex McKenzie. He says, action without planning is the cause of every failure. Kind of makes you think, right?
It does. It's like, yeah, planning might not be the most glamorous part, but it's essential.
Totally. And they introduced this thing called the 10-90 rule, which is basically that spending 10% of your time planning can save you 90% of your execution time.
Wow. That's a serious return on investment.
Right. So it's about taking that time up front to think things through, and then everything else goes smoother.
So what kind of planning do they recommend?
Well, they talk about working with different levels of lists. You've got your master list, which is like your brain dump for all your ideas and projects. Then you've got your monthly plan, weekly plan, and then the daily list, which is like your game plan for each day. And they even suggest making your daily list the night before.
Oh, why is that?
Well, they say it lets your subconscious kind of work on it while you're sleeping.
Interesting. Like you're pre-programming your brain for the day.
Exactly. And then, as you go through your day, you get to check things off your list. And there's something about that little visual progress that's super motivating.
It's satisfying, isn't it?
Totally. Okay, now we're getting into the good stuff. Chapter 3, applying the 80-20 rule to everything.
The 80-20 rule, what is that again?
It's also known as the Pareto principle. Basically, it says that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. So it's about figuring out which tasks are in that crucial 20% and focusing on those.
Ah, got it. So it's not about doing more. It's about doing the right things.
Exactly. The book makes this point that, often one item on a list of 10 can be worth more than all the other 9 combined.
Wow.
I know. So finding that one thing, that's your frog for that day. And the danger, they say, is getting caught up in the other 80%. All those little tasks that make you feel busy but don't actually move the needle.
The busy work trap.
Yes. And it's so easy to fall into because you feel productive, right?
Yeah.
You're checking things off your list, but you're not making real progress on what truly matters.
Right. It's that difference between being efficient and being effective.
100%. Chapter 4 takes things a step further, talking about the long-term consequences of your actions.
So thinking beyond just the immediate to-do list.
Exactly. They talk about this research by Dr. Edward Banfield, who found that having a long-time perspective is a major predictor of success.
That's interesting. So people who think about the future are more successful.
Basically, yeah. It makes sense when you think about it. If you're clear on where you want to be in 5-10 years, it helps you make better decisions in the short term.
It gives you a framework for evaluating your choices.
Exactly. There's a line in the book that says, long-term thinking improves short-term decision-making.
I like that.
Me too. They also talk about how successful people are often really good at delaying gratification. They're willing to put in the hard work now for a bigger payoff later. There's a great quote from Dennis Waitley. He says, failures do what is tension relieving, while winners do what is goal achieving.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. So it's about prioritizing those tasks that have significant consequences, either positive or negative, down the line. Okay, now let's get practical. Chapter 5 is all about the ABCDE method for prioritizing your tasks.
This sounds useful.
It's so simple, but it works. Basically, you look at your to-do list and you assign each item a letter. A, B, C, D, or E. A, tasks are your must-dos, your big, ugly frogs. The things that have serious consequences if you don't do them. B, tasks are things you should do, but they have milder consequences.
Okay, so A is mission critical, B is important but not urgent.
Exactly. Then C, tasks are those things that are nice to do but don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. No real consequences if you don't get to them. D, tasks are things you can delegate to someone else, and E, tasks are things you should just eliminate altogether.
So basically decluttering your to-do list.
Yeah, getting rid of all the unnecessary stuff. And then, within your A tasks, you prioritize them further, A1, A2, A3, with A1 being your biggest, ugliest frog of the day.
Right. So even within the most important tasks, there's a hierarchy.
Exactly. And the key rule with this whole system is that you never do a B task when you still have an unfinished A task. No getting distracted by the smaller stuff when you've got a big frog staring you in the face.
No procrastination allowed.
Nope. Start on that A1 task and stick with it until it's done. All right. Chapter 6 takes a bit of a different angle. It's called Focus on Key Result Areas.
What does that mean exactly?
It's about getting really clear on what you're actually supposed to be accomplishing in your role. What are the key outcomes you're responsible for delivering?
So identifying your core responsibility.
Yeah, the things that really move the needle for your job. And they say that for most jobs, these key areas boil down to about 5 to 7 things.
Okay, so not a million different things, just a handful of really important ones.
Right. And they make this interesting comparison to vital organs in the body. If one of these key result areas is failing, it can seriously impact your overall job performance. Just like if your heart or lungs aren't working properly, your whole body suffers.
That's a good analogy.
It is, right. And they emphasize that these key result areas are things you're completely responsible for. If you don't do them, they won't get done. So the first step is to figure out what those key areas are for your job, and they suggest actually talking to your manager about it to make sure you're on the same page.
That's a good idea. Get that clarity from the get-go.
Totally. And then once you know what your key result areas are, they say you should grade yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in each area.
Oh, interesting. So like a self-assessment.
Yeah, being honest with yourself about where your strengths and weaknesses lie, and this is where things get really insightful. They say that often your weakest key result area acts as a bottleneck, holding back your overall performance. Like you might be amazing at 5 out of 6 things, but if you're really bad at that 6th thing, it's going to drag you down.
It's like the weakest link in the chain.
Exactly. And then they ask this really powerful question. What one skill, if you developed and did it in an excellent fashion, would have the greatest positive impact on your career?
Ooh, that's a good one to ponder.
It is, right. It forces you to think strategically about your personal development. Okay, moving on to chapter 7, the law of forced efficiency. This one's kind of a reality check.
How so?
Well, it basically says that there's never enough time to do everything, but there's always enough time to do the most important thing.
That's actually kind of comforting.
I know, right? It acknowledges that feeling of being constantly overwhelmed, but then refocuses you on what truly matters. They also challenge this idea that we work better under pressure, like those last-minute deadlines. They say it actually leads to more stress and mistakes.
I can definitely see that.
Right. So instead, they suggest asking yourself these 3 questions. What are my highest value activities? What can I, and only I do, that if done well will make a real difference? And what is the most valuable use of my time right now?
Those are really good questions. Especially that last one, bringing it into the present moment.
Yeah, making sure you're constantly evaluating your priorities based on the current situation. Okay, chapter 8 is a short one, but important. It's called Prepare Thoroughly Before You Begin.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
It is, but it's something we often overlook. They say that making sure you have everything you need before you start a task can significantly reduce procrastination.
Oh, I can totally see that. Like if you have to stop and search for something every 5 minutes, it's so easy to get sidetracked.
Exactly. They use this great analogy of preparing to cook a meal. Like, you wouldn't start cooking without first gathering all your ingredients, right?
Makes sense.
So it's about clearing your workspace, having all your materials ready, making sure you have the information you need, all that stuff. They even tell this funny story about aspiring screenwriters in Los Angeles who always say their script is almost done.
Oh, I've heard that one before.
Right. But almost done often means they haven't actually started writing yet. It's all about the preparation.
So true.
Okay, chapter 9 is all about continuous learning. They call it upgrade your skills constantly.
So always be learning.
Basically, yeah. They quote Pat Riley, the basketball coach, who said, "If you're not getting better, you're getting worse."
Oof, that's a harsh truth.
It is, but it's true. And they argue that improving your skills not only makes you more effective at work, it also makes you more motivated and less likely to procrastinate.
Because you actually feel confident doing the work.
Exactly. They even say continuous learning is the minimum requirement for success in any field. And they give a bunch of practical suggestions for how to do it, like reading every day, taking courses, going to industry events, even listening to audiobooks in the car.
Yeah, I love audiobooks for my commute.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's like turning dead time into learning time. Okay, chapter 10 is a really interesting one. It's called Leverage Your Special Talents.
Okay, I like this already.
It's all about identifying your unique strengths and focusing your energy where you naturally excel. They talk about your earning ability, which is basically your capacity to create value through your skills and abilities.
So like what you bring to the table.
Exactly. And they encourage you to do this self-assessment, asking yourself, what are you really good at? What do you genuinely enjoy doing? What kind of work do you consistently get praised for?
That's a good exercise.
It is, right. It helps you figure out where your sweet spot is, where you can make the biggest contribution. And they have a bunch of other great questions in there too, like, what would you do if money were no object? What were you doing when you felt most successful in the past? It's all about really understanding your strengths and aligning your work with those strengths.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does, right. Okay, chapter 11 gets into a slightly less glamorous topic, identifying and overcoming your key constraints.
Oh, so like the things that are holding you back.
Exactly. They say that everyone has a limiting factor, something that's slowing down their progress. And get this, they say that 80% of those constraints are internal.
Really? So it's mostly us getting in our own way.
Apparently, yeah. And they suggest breaking down your processes to figure out where the bottleneck is, like what's the one thing that's slowing everything down. And they really emphasize being honest with yourself about your own limiting factors.
Yeah, self-awareness is key.
Totally. Okay, chapter 12 is a bit more encouraging. It's called Take It One Oil Barrel at a Time.
Okay, that's an interesting title.
It's based on this idea that by the yard, it's hard, but inch by inch, anything's a cinch. It's all about breaking down big, overwhelming tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. And they tell this story about crossing the Sahara Desert, where they used oil barrels as markers. So instead of focusing on the vastness of the desert, they just focused on getting to the next oil barrel.
I like that. It's like breaking down a marathon into mile markers.
Exactly. And they say that even just making a list of the subtasks can be that first oil barrel that gets you moving.
Right. So the key is to just start somewhere, even if it's a small step.
Exactly. Okay, chapter 13 gets real. It's called Put the Pressure on Yourself.
Ooh, that sounds intense.
Well, the basic message is that no one else is coming to save you. Like, you have to be your own motivator. They say you have to set high standards for yourself, even higher than what others expect of you. And they suggest things like gamifying your work, pushing yourself to start earlier, and using thought experiments like imagining you're leaving town for a month to figure out what really needs to get done.
Oh, that's a clever trick.
It is, right?
Yeah.
And they have this great definition of self-esteem from Nathaniel Branden, your reputation with yourself.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's about holding yourself accountable.
Exactly. Okay, chapter 14 is all about taking care of yourself. They call it Maximize Your Personal Powers.
So like self-care for productivity.
Yeah, basically. They talk about how your physical, mental, and emotional energy are your raw materials for getting things done. So you got to protect and nurture those energy levels.
Makes sense.
They talk about how productivity naturally declines after about 8 or 9 hours of work.
Yeah, I've definitely hit that wall before.
Haven't we all? So they say it's important to figure out your peak performance times during the day and schedule your most important tasks for those times. And they really emphasize the importance of sleep, regular days off, and even vacations.
Oh, so breaks are not a luxury. They're essential.
Exactly. They even give some dietary recommendations like eating a high-protein breakfast and lunch and avoiding sugar and processed foods. It's all about giving your body the fuel it needs to perform at its best.
So basically treating yourself like an athlete.
Kind of, yeah. Taking care of your body so your mind can function optimally. Okay, chapter 15 is about motivation. Motivate yourself into action.
Because sometimes you just don't feel like it, right?
Totally. And they make this point that 95% of your emotions are actually determined by your self-talk.
Really. So what we tell ourselves shapes how we feel.
Apparently so. And they say it's important to cultivate an optimistic mindset, like actively look for the good in situations, find the lessons and setbacks, and focus on solutions.
So like turning that negative self-talk into something more positive.
Exactly. They also recommend using positive affirmations, like telling yourself, I can do this, or I feel terrific,
Yeah.
and just generally focusing on your goals in the future.
Focusing on what you want to achieve.
Yeah. Okay, now we're getting into the really counterintuitive stuff. Chapter 16 is called Technology is a Terrible Master.
Okay, that sounds intriguing.
It's basically about how technology can be both a blessing and a curse. Like, it can help us be more productive, but it can also be a huge distraction.
Oh yeah, I definitely feel that.
Right. They talk about how constantly checking email and social media can fragment our attention and prevent us from getting real work done.
It's like we're addicted to the notifications.
Totally. And they suggest setting boundaries around technology use, like having specific times when you check email and social media and then putting your phone away the rest of the time.
So creating those technology-free zones.
Exactly. They also talk about being more mindful of how you use technology, like only using it for tasks that actually support your goals.
So using it strategically instead of just mindlessly scrolling.
Exactly. Okay, chapter 17 brings us back to the core of Eat That Frog. It's called Do the Most Difficult Task First.
A man event.
Yeah, this is like the culmination of all the other principles. They say this is the ultimate productivity technique. Identify your biggest, ugliest frog for the day and make it the first thing you tackle. And they lay out the steps. Make your list. Prioritize using the ABCDE and 80-20 rules. Select your A1 task. Prepare everything you need. Clear your workspace, and then start working on it immediately without interruption.
No distractions allowed.
Nope. And they claim that if you do this consistently, you can double your productivity within a month.
Wow. That's a bold claim.
It is, right? But it makes sense when you think about it. You're getting the hardest thing out of the way first, so everything else feels easier.
And you're building momentum.
Exactly. They also suggest adopting this just for today
Yeah.
mindset, which makes it feel less overwhelming. Like, just focus on doing it today, and then tomorrow you can reassess.
That's a good tip.
Okay. Chapter 18 is for those times when your frog feels impossibly big. Slice and dice the task.
So breaking it down into smaller pieces.
Yeah, exactly. They introduce the salami slice method, which is basically doing one small part of the task at a time, and the Swiss cheese method, which is working on the task for a specific short period, even if you don't finish a whole slice.
So like working on it for 15 minutes and then taking a break.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm.
The idea is to just get started, overcome that initial inertia, and they talk about the natural urge to completion that kicks in once you start making progress. Like, your brain wants to finish what it started.
That's true. Once I get going on something, I usually want to see it through.
Me too. Okay, chapter 19 is all about time management. Create large chunks of time.
So making time for those big, important tasks.
Exactly. They say you need large blocks of uninterrupted time to do your best work. And they give examples like salespeople scheduling time for calling prospects, executives setting aside time to connect with key clients, even blocking out time for exercise or reading.
So being proactive about scheduling those important activities.
Yeah, treating those appointments with yourself just as seriously as you would a meeting with someone else. And they suggest even utilizing travel time, like turning an airplane ride into your office.
I do that all the time.
It's a great way to maximize those otherwise unproductive hours. Okay, chapter 20 is develop a sense of urgency.
Okay, so getting things done quickly.
Yeah, but it's more than that. They talk about how successful people are very action-oriented. Like, they don't wait for things to happen, they make things happen.
They're proactive.
Exactly. And they explain this mental state of flow, which is that feeling of being completely absorbed in a task and performing at your best.
Oh, yeah, I love that feeling.
Me too. And they say that cultivating a sense of urgency can actually help you trigger that flow state.
Interesting. So like putting a little pressure on yourself can actually be beneficial.
It seems so. They also talk about the momentum principle, which is basically that it's easier to keep going once you've started. And they suggest using simple self-talk prompts like, do it now, or back to work, to get yourself moving.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that little push.
Totally. Okay, and finally, chapter 21, the grand finale, single handle every task.
So focusing on one thing at a time.
Yeah, this is like the ultimate point of all the planning and prioritizing. They say that focusing your attention on one task at a time with complete concentration can reduce the time it takes to complete it by 50% or more.
Wow, that's significant.
I know, right? And they caution against constantly starting and stopping tasks, saying it's super inefficient. And they emphasize the importance of self-discipline, quoting Albert Hubbard, who said, "Self-discipline is the ability to make yourself do what you should do, when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not."
Another good one.
Right. And they conclude by saying that focusing on your most valuable task and seeing it through to completion is the key to personal effectiveness and a guaranteed path to future success.
So basically, eat that frog.
Exactly. So if we were to distill all of Eat That Frog down to one core message, it would be this. Figure out your most important task, that big, ugly frog, and make it the first thing you tackle each day. And remember, these are skills, not talents. You can learn them and get better at them with practice. So as you go about your day today, I want you to think about what your biggest frog is. And make a commitment to yourself to take at least one small step towards tackling it right after you finish listening to this. And maybe even spend a little time thinking about which of these 21 principles really resonated with you and why. You might be surprised at how much of a difference even just one or two of these strategies can make in your life. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you next time.
Sip.